Hi, it's Dave Mattson, CEO of Sandler. Listen, it's great to be with you today. Unfortunately, we won't be face-to-face, where we can kind of jump into role play, right? When we're talking to salespeople, they always love to say, well, let me hear you do that or let me see it, but we won't be able to do that today. But my goal is to share with you enough ideas that hopefully we can go and get some market share, right? That's the ultimate goal. Now, as I looked at the members, I realized that we have some clients in the room. But for those that aren't clients, let me just put into context what we're going to talk about over the next 45 to 50 minutes together. Where did all this stuff come from? I mean, how do I know this stuff works? Well, Sandler's, we've been in business for over 50 years. David Sandler was a salesperson, not a professor who wrote a book, not somebody that was fired from an industry and is now an expert. Sandler was a salesperson. As a matter of fact, he failed miserably in sales because he used all the traditional techniques, right? Would you like to see me on Monday or Wednesday, the alternate choice, and all the other ones that we probably learned over time. The problem is, what he found is that the buyers knew those techniques. So when he would say, hey, would you like to see me Wednesday at 2 or Thursday at 10? They said, oh, you mean the alternate choice close? And so he's like, I'm getting killed. So Sandler went to a psychologist and really created the Sandler selling system. It's based on psychology, right? So we have won year after year for the last 10 years, top sales training organization in the world, top sales management training in the world. And we've got over 265 offices in your backyard, as a matter of fact. So we have local training centers everywhere, and we focus in on the S&B marketplace. And just off to the side, if there's anything that I say today that sparks some interest, you are welcome to attend any of those things as my guest. Just simply say, I heard Dave, and he said I could crash a class. That's like the magic phrase. They will let you in for free. Have at it, and I hope that we can bring you some value. So Sandler is a conversational sales model. Conversational sales model. We don't teach a lot of scripts. We have them, but we try not to teach a lot of them because the problem with scripts are, you as a salesperson, you learn the scripts, but the other side doesn't have the script. So if I could give my buyer the script, that would be awesome, right? Because I already know my part. I'm saying, no, you're supposed to say this, ma'am. But it doesn't work that way. And I think every situation is different. So you have to have all these tools in your toolkit. Now, I believe that if I asked you a question, are salespeople made or born? We would go back and forth, but I believe that we are made. I don't think we're born. We're not born into being a doctor or being in advertising or being in home sales, whatever the case may be. My parents were teachers. So I grew up on a single income from a teacher, 4 boys, right? So we went through a lot of food. My parents had this phrase, you can have whatever you want in life, you just have to pay for it. And so I'm the oldest child. And I'm pretty sure when my parents were there, we're getting ready for number 1 to come in the world, they were like, hey, I wish maybe we could have a doctor, or maybe we could have an engineer, or an architect, or a lawyer, whatever the case may be. I'm sure there's a long list because they want that, something better for our children. And so when I came into the world, I'm pretty sure my parents did not say, oh my goodness gracious, that's the first salesperson in our family. What have we done? We have failed somewhere. That's not what happens. And I fell into sales, and I went to college. I didn't go through a track called sales, although right now Sandler's probably in 70 higher ed learning education systems, such as Harvard for our MBA program. So we didn't have that back then. So when you kind of bumped around, we found ourselves into sales. So I've got to share this system with you. And call it a system because it's replicatable. You could do it time in and time again. Now, so where are we today? We all know where we are, right? The market's not great. I don't care what industry that we're in. We wish it was just like last year, for sure. And this too shall pass. So unfortunately, I'm old enough now. This is my 3rd economic crisis. Now, a little different. We don't have social distancing, and you could actually go to work back then. But the same result was that no one was spending money. And you really had to be on your game, to make sure that you took advantage of all the opportunities, because we don't have a lot of opportunities like we used to have. And I think that that's fair. So The question is, what are we actually doing? Because we have to look down and say, what am I doing over the next 6-8 weeks to make sure that I'm protecting my client base? I'm protecting what I have, and I'm nurturing, and I'm doing all the things that I'm sure you're doing. But at the same time, I've got to look forward and say, how am I going to come out the other side of this with a much better position than my competitors? So if I go back to 08-09, because we've got hundreds of thousands of clients around the US, they actually did far better than most businesses. Why? Because they had retooled. They had done all the things necessary to protect themselves when it was down, but also to come out the other side. So they kind of created what I'm going to call momentum. And so I'll ask you, and think about it, because I know we have some salespeople on. We've got some selling sales managers as well. So a mix of different roles. But how's your momentum, right? You as a person, you as an individual, or how about even our buyers? Different industries are being affected differently. I've got some of my customers that are just, they're in that moving, they're plodding along, because I think you're in that freeze, flight, right? Or just paralyzed things, right? So you've got to figure out where they are. But I would say for us, that we call on the same types of customers that you do, that in the last probably 10 days, we've had more activity than we had in 8 to 10 weeks. So it's now happening. But we're going to have to get to a spot where we are looking forward, that we want to make sure that we've picked and choose who our customer base is going to be for the very short term that has that momentum. Because I'll tell you as a CEO, every single time I always, I say, what? We had a great year last year. Why did this happen? How did this happen? And I'll go into what I call this Eeyore phase where, I'm not happy about it. I'm probably denying that this is even a real issue. And then I'm resisting the fact that there's massive change around me. But sooner or later, we all have to just wake up, right, and say, okay, I got to do something. Because obviously this see no evil, hear no evil technique that I'm using isn't working. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing all those things. So what I want to share with you today is, what can we do to get that momentum going? What are those things? So one of the things that I want to share with you is called the success triangle. And it's probably when I first heard it, because I was a client, I went to Sandler, I was a hostage, I did not go, willingly. And I'm introverted by nature, I'm not an extrovert. You would not pick me out on a line and says, oh, that's a sales guy. You wouldn't do it. I'm not a big networking guy. I probably shy away from networking meetings. I'd rather do a ton of other prospecting activities than, go to cold chicken and melted ice cream. So we all have our little personality things that you like or don't like. And so for me, I poo-pooed this concept actually until probably 10 years in. And then I realized it was probably one of the most powerful things that you can do to instigate change, right? So we call it the success triangle. You have to decide as an individual contributor, what is success for you? So I'm not going to define that in the middle of the triangle. But what that does do is, we were thinking about, okay, so how do I think about things? Attitude, right? When do I do things? Behavior. And then what do I do? Like, how do I say it? And what do I do? That's all the technique stuff. And one, if it's missing, does not work. It does not work. So have you ever gone to a seminar where you feel like really pumped up, right? Hey, that was a great seminar. If we were together over a 2-day program, I always tell all the people on the first day, if you don't get 25 actionable ideas that you can implement and make money, if you don't feel like you got that day 1, do not come back day 2, and I will refund all your money. Because I just think that you've got to see value, right? But if you've gone to those seminars, you get all pumped up, and then what happens? You say to yourself, I'm going to do it. And it goes right back to what you were doing about 2 weeks later. You could take anything here. I want to lose weight. Let's use that one. So I've got to have the mindset, right? Hey, it's time. I've messed around long enough. It's time. I've got to lose some weight. I could do the behaviors, which are, hey, I've got to have 1 less slice of cake each night. Hey, I probably shouldn't go back to 4ths at dinner time. And I'm going to have all my technique stuff where I'm counting calories and I'm making sure that I'm reading the back of packages and all that good stuff. But if I did all that and I didn't go, I skipped behavior or anything else, it's lopsided and it would not work. So let me peel back the onion for this, because I believe that you have to have a good mindset, you have to have the right behaviors, and you have to be able to know what to say, how to say it, when to say it for good technique. So let's kind of break this up a little bit. So let's talk about what I'm going to talk about, attitude, right? So if you have good behavior and good technique, which means, hey, I'm doing it when I'm supposed to be doing it, and I'm doing it right, but I'm just not into it, right? So what does that mean? That's just like I'm going through the motions. And to me, the head stuff is so important, because I think success, 80% of it anyways, resides between your ears. I believe it. You know, we can talk ourselves into a great call or a bad call. You can watch any sports on TV, I don't care what you watch, and you can see occasionally where it's like a battle, right? And then all of a sudden, the momentum changes and one team is just dominating. Well, what happened? Did the other team become less skilled? No. Mindset, they said, we're not going to win this. They kind of gave up. I can't tell you how many times I've said, you know, we're watching, let's say, football as a family. We're saying, those guys have given up. It's over. And no matter what they did from that point forward, nothing was going to work out. And I know you've experienced it. You've seen it in your personal life. You've seen it in your professional life. So it's always there. But there's more to it than just, hey, waking up and chanting, hey, I'm going to feel good about myself today. Because I think, you know, we have all these scripts going on in our lives that really form us to the salesperson that we are today. So as an example, I grew up in New England. Everything's half empty in New England, so that's always an issue to begin with. But putting that aside for a minute, because that's a therapy issue. You know, my parents loved me, nurtured me, but they didn't help me become a great salesperson. And I don't think yours did either. So what does that mean? Well, my parents told me when I went out to play and I would go down the street or I would go 2 blocks over, they would say, David, be home before dark and don't talk to strangers. Right, don't talk to strangers. Made sense, right? I tell my kids that. Makes sense. They also would give me messages that it was impolite to talk about money. So I already told you we had no money. And so here comes Uncle Billy. So Uncle Billy had money. And so when he would show up with a new car, I didn't even know what a new car was. And I would say, Uncle Billy, that's an awesome car. How much did that cost you? My father would say, hey, we don't talk about money like that. That's rude. You apologize to Uncle Billy. That's none of your business. That's Uncle Billy's business. And I was, you know, chastised for that. Or how about some others, like only speak when spoken to. Only speak when spoken to. Or how about school? You want to be the first one to raise your hand because you had the answer, right? Or, hey, respect your elders. So be respectful of those who are older, who are more successful than you are. All right, so you get the idea. So let's fast forward. Now you work for me. I'm your sales manager. What am I going to tell you to do? Well, I'm going to tell you to go talk to every stranger that you know, right? Which is completely opposite. I'm going to tell you to talk about money as quickly as possible because I'm trying to find prospects who are willing and able to make an investment. So I want you to talk about money. I want you to ask a lot of questions like a doctor, right? I want you to have equal business stature, regardless if you're calling on somebody double your age or it makes 5 times the amount of money that you do. And you're trying to figure out, how do I have credibility? I'm supposed to be the expert here. So all that self-talk that's going on, right? I don't want you to suffer from premature presentation syndrome. So I don't want you to be the first one to wave your hand. Ooh, I got the answer. No, it's almost the exact opposite in sales. And so it takes a lot of time for us to get rid of this head trash, is what I call it. And so I'll give you another quick example because, you know, outside of comfort zone, which I'll talk about in a second, we run into this. So I'm going to do a personal example. I am a golfer. Now, And if I just give you some background, I am a bad golfer, right? So I am terrible. I started at 35, I'm 56. So I've convinced myself that's why I'm terrible. So I've already rationalized why I'm no good. And when I go out, I've always said to myself things like, just get off the first tee, just get off the first tee, just get off the first tee. Because if I start strong, I know I end strong, right? But there's these things called water holes. So for those that don't golf, which you're better off, by the way. But for those that don't golf, what that means is that you come up to the tee box, and before you tee off, you look out, and there's a pond out there. And your job is not to get it in the water, right? So let's just do mindset. So, Dave, I've already said I'm a bad golfer. I have rationalized why I'm a bad golfer. I admit I'm a bad golfer. And so I look out at that water, which, by the way, I should be able to hit over, but it's water, so it's intimidating. I see these big monsters coming out of the water saying, give me your $15 golf ball. Hit it over here, big guy. Because, I'm looking down, I see this $15 golf ball, and I say, what am I doing here? So what do? Do I say, I'm just going to whack it over there? I probably should, actually. But you know what I really do? I walk back to the cart, and I pull out of my bag water balls. These are called water balls. Now, for those, again, that don't golf, I'll explain what this is. These are golf balls that you would never actually use with other people. These are golf balls that you find on the course that you put them in your bag. Why would you put them in your bag? Because you know that you're going to need them in case you have little confidence to do what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to use a ball that I don't care about. I could get my $15 white ball, or I could get this ball that I wouldn't be seen dead with. But I'm going to give it to the pond gods. And so you get the hang of it. And I think the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to mindset is this concept called comfort zone. And a comfort zone is where we have all the skills, we have all the stuff, but for some reason we're working at like 60, 70% of our capacity. Like, let's pretend for a second that you were an absolute sales animal. You were doing all the things that were super uncomfortable. You put in the hours, you put in the time, you did all the things that you're supposed to do. And then we hit a certain level, let's say income-wise, where you're making enough money to do what you'd like to. You're hitting your personal goals, you're paying your bills, you're saving for whatever you want to save for. And sometimes something clicks. And that click is, why you're working so hard? You've made it. And then we coast, right? Or I've made it to sales management. Whew. And now we coast. So I have occupational comfort zones. I got financial comfort zones. I've got comfort zones where, hey, I'm going to stop working as hard as I did because now I'm going to, coach my kids' soccer games. Whatever it is, we all have them. And it's not that we have them that's a bad thing. We all have them, and they're all situational. But what we don't want is to make sure that that comfort zone becomes a way of life. So you have to ask yourself, how's your head? Right? Do you have any life scripts that are causing you not to do the things that you need to do to be successful as a salesperson? Are you stuck in a comfort zone? You have to ask those questions, right? So, but the mindset is super important because I could teach you how to cold call. I could give you the right techniques. But if you're afraid to pick up that phone because you can't talk to strangers or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. You're not going to make them. So that's the importance of this. Now, let's talk about behavior. Because if I had good mindset, attitude, and I had good technique, right? So my mind's on straight, I feel good about it, I've got equal business stature, I'm saying all the right things, but I don't do enough of them. I don't do enough of them. If I go back to my dieting analogy, if I decide to diet 3 days a month, it doesn't do anything. So I think this is, especially in today's environment, one of the most important things that you should gravitate towards. You should be a behavioralist. You really have to look at the situation that's going today, because I believe we're not getting the same swings at the bat, right? We're not getting enough opportunities in today's environment. And maybe you are, so kudos to you. But the tens of thousands of people that we service, they're saying, hey, we're not getting enough opportunities like we used to. So you got to make sure that you're really good at it, right? So we've got to make sure that we're upping our behavior just to stay status quo. So here's what we think. I'd like you to create what's called a cookbook. Now, a cookbook is a recipe for success. What does that mean? Well, you've got to reverse engineer your sales process. So for instance, I've got a $3 million quota. All right, $3 million quota. How many sales would that be? Let's just hypothetically say it's going to be 100 sales. Okay. Out of 100 sales, how many presentations that we have to do? And you get the hang of it, right? So how many second meetings, blah, 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 all the way to the front end. By the way, that's all lagging indicators. A leading indicator is the stuff that happens ahead of time, and that's the behavioral stuff. What do you have to do every day, every week, from a sales behaviors perspective in order for you to hit your number, right? So listen, I would always stress out, always freak out. How am I going to get that number? How am I going to get that number? But I'm going to share with you in a couple minutes that you don't have control of that. You only have control of what you do. But most salespeople, like 8 out of 10, cannot tell you what they should be doing every single day to be successful. So I've got 400 trainers, and we add offices all the time. And if you came into business with me, I give you a behavioral plan. And that behavioral plan may look like something like this. I want you to send out 5 LinkedIn referral letters per day. You need 2 unique conversations per day. You need 2 lunch and learns per month. You need 20 outbound calls per day. And so that's what we tell you to do. Now, will the behavioral plan change based on your role? Yeah, of course. Does it change based on your experience and success? Yup. Because a brand new person in the industry is going to have a different behavioral plan than somebody who's been doing for 30 years, only calling on referrals. But you have to have it. You got to have it. And as I said, most people say, well, absolutely, I know what it is. But they can't document it, which means they're winging it, which means they're making it up. Now, here's my biggest fear. My biggest fear is, although you understand the concept of reverse engineering your sales process, you don't have a sales process. And that's the other big challenge, especially today, because I think that if we know that salespeople are born, not made, right, or they're made, not born, I apologize, that means we constantly have to be getting better. And we've got to tweak, we've got to be like scientists, right? So if I were to ask you this, and for the sales leaders that are listening, please do this with your team. For the salespeople, do it yourself. Get a blank piece of paper and draw 5, 10 boxes on that piece of paper. Just boxes, just draw them out. And what I'd like you to do is this. I'd like you to capture the sales process that you follow from the time that we prospect to the time that I've got a happy customer who wants to do more business with you. What steps do you follow? Now, as an individual producer, you have to sit back and think most of the time. Maybe not you, but others listening, right? Because they're kind of like on autopilot. They have been driving so long, they just don't actually know the directions to get a place. They say, you got to turn to the left house. I mean, it's just like second nature, right? But you've got to figure out what that is. And I have done this a long time. And when I'm with chief revenue officers or EVPs of sales, and they'll say, Dave, we have it down pat. All of our people, it's like military, boom, 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 boom. They got it down. And I'll always say, that's awesome. Let me make you a deal. If they have it down, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for free. If in fact they don't, though, you're in 2-year contract. And so we kind of bet. Some take me up on it, some don't, but most do because they're pretty confident. We get 10 people in the room. I don't care which 10. I give them a blank piece of paper. I say draw out, 10, 15 boxes, whatever the number is. I'd like you to write down your process that you follow from the start to the finish. So that in itself would say, do they follow it? But they don't. They don't. So there you have it, right? So it's all over the place. So that's important. Now, you've got to figure out what yours is. You don't need us to do that. Just create it. What do I do step by step? And you really do need to know what it is today, because I do believe with all the stuff that's going on, you're not going to networking meetings, right? You're not doing all the things that we used to do. And even if you did like those, right? I'm telling you what I used to do when I was in pure sales, but you can't do that stuff today. It's not even allowed. So you have to have a different set of behaviors. You've got to up your behavioral plan. My team has upped it by 40% just to make sure that we're treading water, right? We're breaking even to where we want to be as far as our goals are concerned. And so that's the key here. No one likes this though, because this means this falls on you. And so, but I do believe if you have peaks and valleys in production, that tells you that you're not on a behavioral plan. If you're doing all the business in the last week, that tells you probably you're not on a behavioral plan. So there's a million ways that you can see that you're not, and I'm happy to give you one. I'm happy. If I say anything in this presentation that you say, well, I'd like to see how you do that, just get me on LinkedIn. I will give you the tools. You can create your own behavioral plan. Have at it, right? My gift. Figure it out, because it'll change your life. So let's talk about the last one, which is technique, right? Because if I have great attitude and I don't do it, it's important. But if I go back to the thing that I said, remember I said that you can't manage what you can't control? That is so true. So no matter what the technique is, which I'm going to share with you in a second, I can't manage a $2 million quota. I can't manage who's going to say yes or no. I can only manage what Dave does. And see, that's key, because I always used to freak out on who's going to say yes. Or I need these 5 people to say yes this month or I'm not going to hit my number. Well, I couldn't control what they're doing. I mean, they would skip meetings. They would say no. They would negotiate the margin where I couldn't even do it. So I don't know what they're going to do, but I'll always bet on myself. And that's this rule here, and it's a big rule. So pay attention to that one. All right, so let's figure out. I've got good attitude. I've got good technique, right, or good behavior. Let's talk about that technique for a second, because if I've got a good head, I'm doing the behaviors, but my technique's off, then I'm just working too hard. I'm working too hard. So Sandler's known for awesome tactics and strategies. I mean, that's what we're known for in the industry. And, today we're practicing all the things that we have to do. And I'm going to share some of those things with you because, our group, as an example, and I believe we've got some great studettes and some great studs on our team, but we role play twice a week for an hour, every Tuesday morning and every Thursday morning, because we're getting our talk tracks down, right? I'm a big believer in talk tracks. What is a talk track? Because that's a buzzword. Well, I believe you could probably write down anywhere from 40 to 60 things that you would have to, if you were like the best salesperson in the country, what should you be able to know off the top of your head? So I'll give you a couple, like a 30-second commercial or elevator pitch. What makes you so different? Your top 10 objections and here are my responses. Here's how I talk about my company. Whatever it is, those are the things that you should be able to know, recite, you got it down pat, because I don't want to be thinking about what I'm going to say. I want to listen to what they're doing. And so there's probably anywhere from 50 to 70 of these things, but you should get your talk tracks down. And so for me, as an example, I drive 45 minutes to work, and I come in really early, so I can't call any customers that early, but I will do my talk tracks every single day. And when I do a talk, I probably may have done a talk, let's just say, 100 times. I'm still putting in hours and hours of prep time, because I do believe the people on the other side of your calls deserve the best that you have. And I also think your family is relying on you to do that, right? So we've got to figure this out. Now, in today's world, it's a different situation. So you could say, well, Dave, I've got 30 years experience, or I've been doing this for 15 years. Okay, I'm not going to argue whether you've got 15 years experience or 1 year's experience 15 times. That's not even the point. The point is, what's going on today is different than what was going on 6 months ago. So you should situationally sharpen your talk tracks, get them down. You know, the objections that we're hearing today were not the objections that we were hearing 60 days ago. It's not. So we're constantly improving, constantly doing those things. So let's focus, shift to what techniques may I give you that'll hopefully help us, maintain and gain market share. What would they be? So I want to talk to you a little bit about something called CARE. So this is the first thing that I want to share with you from a technique perspective. And CARE is the way that you should look at the customer base, the prospect base, the buyers in your territories, right? So, because you have very finite areas, right? I know what you do. So I think there's 4 ways to look at what's going on within any account plan, any territory plan. One is, what are the accounts that I want to keep, right? So those are the ones that you're protecting, especially now, right? So I'm protecting them, I want to nurture them, I want to support them, I'm calling them, seeing how they're dealing with the issue, how are you doing business-wise? Whatever you're doing to keep your customers, right? Customers want to be appreciated, they want to be loved, and now's the time, because if you're not doing that, your customers are somebody else's prospects. You know that, right? They have other options. So that's the keep group. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Now I've got this other group called attain. The attain group is the people who you want to go get. You're not doing business with them now. They're on your target list. They're on your hit list. You see them all the time. You're like, hey, I want to get into that account eventually. How do I do it? My recapture are past customers who left us for whatever reason, right? So those are my recaptures. Maybe there's a management change on their end. They had a different philosophy. Maybe we dropped the ball. Maybe whatever the case may be. And then we have the expand, which are those who I want to do more business with. So if I think about those 4 categories, let's put ourselves into this situation where we find ourselves in today's world. The majority of salespeople are only spending a lot of time on keeps. Okay, I get it, but based on the industry, you could probably be doing some attains as well. So in my group, as an example, I want to do a couple different things with this model. Number 1, I want to identify who's who in each of these 4 categories within my territory. I also want to then say, how much time am I going to spend on those 4 categories? If you were being honest, are you spending time on all 4 of those? Or are we only doing keeps, right? So as an example, we trained 31,000 people last year. And now within 6 weeks, I'm streaming all of them. So a complete model shift. But who am I finding the most business with right now? It's not attains, it's recaptures. The people that my group would have just not even paid attention to. They left us, okay, good riddance, there's plenty of business over here. They're the ones who are actually becoming our clients. Like, it's unbelievable. And so we are keeping. Yes, we are landing and expanding to different products and services, right? But we're getting a lot of recaptures, because I don't want you to focus just on one. I want you to have a blended group. You have to decide what that is for you. But we have different strategies for each one. We have different call cycles for each one. Because again, if you're spending all your time looking down, because remember what I said, you got to make sure that we're looking down, but we also look forward. So that's important. You also want to relook at your ideal client profile. Look, some industries are thriving and some are not. We are leaving, not even paying attention to some of the industries, because we know that they're hurting really bad. There's no way we're going to be doing business there. Now, I'll make sure that I'm nurturing my customer base, but I've focused, my ideal customer is this. And we have identified that's my ideal customer, which may not have been true 60 to 90 days ago. And so once I find them, I'm going to say, okay, who am I calling on? What's my persona? Because I'm going to create what I call battle cards, right? So who am I calling on? What are top 2 or 3 pains or frustrations, right? Which I'll talk to you about in a second. And then here are my qualifying questions. So that's important, because depending on the industry, you're going to be calling on different people within a company. They're going to have different problems, different frustrations, different challenges, and therefore you're going to have different questions. So if you have battle cards, awesome. If you don't, you can spend a couple hours creating them. Happy to give you a template, but you should get them down. It's really important. So you can kind of switch and talk to that particular industry of what's important to them. You already know you already got your product knowledge down. That's not what we're talking about here. It's how you're going to connect your product knowledge to my industry. So you're calling on me and I'm doing training and consulting, then you have to pull me into your story. Why am I spending money with you versus somewhere else when I don't have a lot of money to spend? So that's important. So let's talk about something else. And again, I'm trying to give you a lot because with people with different skill sets and different roles, I don't want to just focus on one or two things. My goal was to give you lots of different things to think about, and then hopefully one or two will stick for you. So let's talk about this next concept, which is the email and direct messages. So we've been training LinkedIn since day one. I wrote a book on social selling with LinkedIn. I think we have 27 books on the market now. And the top two that are super popular, that sell like hotcakes, is digital prospecting. So we do a lot in this area, and I'm sure you do too, actually. So yes, with the LinkedIn letters, but if we're doing emails, just a couple things. Hey, let's keep it short and sweet, right? There's a lot of science behind this. Let's keep it short and sweet. You know, saying how wonderful you are and all those great things about the company, and that's why you should take my call, doesn't necessarily work. It's not as effective as it could be. I think you should do what's called pain indicators. So what does that mean? If you're calling on me, you know, you should be doing almost an elevator pitch in about 3 or 4 sentences. What's that? Here's who I am. Here's who I call on, right? The types of companies that I help. Here's the problems and the challenges that they have, and here are some of the things that I do. It's very short, it's very sweet, it's easy to do. So that's super effective. Remember I said if you worked for me, you're going to do 5 LinkedIn referral letters per day? Well, this is one of those social selling things that we're talking about, but we are doing emails as well, texting as well. I've got 5 kids. If you want to get me, you should text me, because when that text goes off, it's like a Pavlov dog. I'm looking immediately, not so much to my email, but if you got a quick subject line and I can read it very quickly, you've got me to at least pay attention. I may not call you, but I have read it. See, my style, my behavioral style is let's just cut to the chase, let's keep it short and sweet. So there are different letters, different approaches for each. Again, happy to give them to you, but pay attention to, are you spending enough time on this? This next one I love, and I'm going to give you 3 more things and we'll do Q&A. Pre-call planning. And this is one of those things where I think it's one of the most valuable things that you could do as a salesperson. If you're a sales manager, you should not be going on calls with your salespeople unless you have a pre-call planner. And this is one of those things where you say, I have been doing this for a while. There's nothing that they could say that I don't know. And I'm sure that's true. But you should spend at least 25% of your call time thinking about what could happen on that call. What are you going to say? What are my goals of that call? And really focus just on what's going to happen in that brief time that you have an appointment, whether it's virtual, all mine are on Zoom, right? So it doesn't matter how you're doing this. I want you to focus on what's happening. And most people don't do it, but I want to know, okay, do I have an agenda? You know, have I looked up their profile? Do we have any mutual connections? What are the top 3 questions I want to ask them? What are the questions that they may ask me, and I better have a response? Now, it's fantasy. I don't know if they're going to ask me that, but I say, well, they could probably ask me this based on the industry, based on the persona, based on my battle card. So that's there. But from a management perspective, for the leaders that are watching, this is the best coaching and training tool that you could have, because if you have a choice between talking about a call before it happens or after, which one would you choose? I always do before. And I told you I have 5 kids, so my son, you know, if he comes home and says, listen, I've got an F in math, there's not too much I'm going to do on my debrief. But if I did it on a pre-call, he said, look, I'm struggling in these areas. We could help him tutor, do whatever, practice, and then at least he has a better shot at it. And I think that's what you're doing. Pre-call planners help salespeople become self-sufficient. It really does. I have statistic after statistic that'll increase your win rate if you do those. Now, will it take you 15 minutes? Yes, it will. Will it save you a ton of time after the fact? Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And again, I have a template, happy to give it to you. Let's talk about this one. This is called an upfront contract. Love this. I think a salesperson, a good one, should know exactly where they are in the process and what they have to do to move to the next step. I believe that. So that's why it's important to have your process down. But there are 5 things that I want to do at the beginning of every call. I don't care if it's Zoom, I don't care if it's face-to-face, and I don't care if it's the phone. First one is the purpose of today. So yes, you have an appointment. Yes, they're expecting your call, but chances are they haven't looked at, their Outlook or however they do their calendars until maybe a couple minutes before you got there. So they forget. Or how about you have multiple buyers in the room? You know and I know, we've all been to meetings where we weren't really sure of the agenda. So when you start off by saying, hey, appreciate you seeing me. The purpose of today was X, and just say it out loud. And you'll find some people who didn't. I've had people just start talking to each other because they're like, well, why are we doing that? Or hey, what's this over here? I love that. Let's get it done before I start. Time is our most precious commodity. Here's number 2, time for today. So it'll sound something like this. I know on the phone we spoke about 45 minutes together today. Is that still good with you? I'm going to ask that. Now you could say, well, why would you do that? What happens if it's a no? Well, because I don't want to start going into a sales process and then 20 minutes into it, they say, Dave, look, tons of fires today. What you've said is awesome, but I'd like you to put it into some sort of proposal and give us a presentation so I can take it back to people that you're never going to meet. And of course, that's sarcastic, but you get the hang of it, right? I want to know up front how much time. They're not going to bail. It's much easier. And if they say you only have 20 minutes today because of what's going on, I can adjust. Here's the third thing I want you to do. Their agenda. You should ask the prospects, your buyers, and I do this with customers all the time. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure that we cover today to make sure that we've maximized your time? Because sales is a conversation. So if you go prepared and you're doing your thing, but I don't know what they want to know from me, then how do we have a conversation? That's like going to dinner with somebody that just talks, and you just can't wait to go home. So I always say, what are the 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure that I cover? And sometimes it's nothing, and that's okay. Here's the 4th thing. I tell them, well, here are the 2 or 3 things that I'd like to ask you today and talk about from a topic perspective. And I tell them right there. And I'm telling them right there for a couple of reasons. 1, they can get ready for it. 2, if they don't want to talk about that, we might as well deal with that right now, right? So let's just find out. And so we have what I call a mutual agreement about what we want to cover in the call. And here's number 5, outcome. And so what I have found after the 45 minutes of us asking each other lots of questions, we're going to be in a couple different positions. We may find that there's not a fit for right now, and that's okay. Or we may decide that, yeah, there may be a fit here, and of which we could take it to the next step. And the next step in my process is, and you fill in the blanks, X, Y, and Z. So I tell people before I start what I'm going to close for at the end of the meeting. I think it is a sin to try to close. If you had a 1-hour meeting, you're going to say at the end of 50 minutes, so what do you think? You're forcing the buyer to say, I must think it over. But if I tell them up front, they've had all the time to ask good questions. I know up front, I may hear before I even start. I can't make the decision on my own. But again, I want to know that before I start. I think you should leave every call with a firm future commitment. That's just fact, in my opinion, right? So this is a wonderful technique. I do it to start every call, and I end every call by saying, hey, let's cover real quick. What do you want to make sure we cover on the next call? Here's what I plan on doing, We should be in a position to do this. It's great. People love to know what's going to happen. Lowers that buyer-seller wall that we've all experienced. Let's talk about buying emotions. So I think that people buy emotionally and then justify their decisions intellectually. I believe that you should be a doctor of sales. I don't think that, your presentation is awesome enough for me to reach into my pocket I don't think talking about yourselves is a winner, because if I asked you, hey, what are the top 3 reasons I should do business with you? And you can tell me stuff like, hey, proven track record, service, bada, bada, bada. But if a competitor came in 5 hours later and I asked them the same question, I'm pretty sure they're going to say the same thing. So it's not about us. I want you to figure out, what are they trying to solve? What's the issue? What's the frustration? Why aren't they doing something else? Because they have a lot of options, right? So why aren't they doing something else? And a doctor asks questions. So if they say, whatever, what does a doctor ask you when you first walk in? If you say, hey, doc, I got a back pain. They don't say, let me tell you about my degrees. We started in 1942. Our publication is the best. They don't say any of that. They don't show you all the tools. You know what they say? Tell me more about that. Where does it hurt exactly? How long has that been an issue? What have you done to try to fix that before? Have you done anything else? Have you tried other ways of advertising or whatever? So you want to do that. You also want to say, well, is it that important? I mean, is there a good business case why this is done? Because I think you should have financial impact of pain, because it's easier when you're talking about money later, when they say, hey, I'm losing customers. Hey, I want mind share in my community. Hey, I want this. I want to know that up front. So this pain concept Sandler actually brought to the marketplace. You may have heard it. Sandler has been, he got credit for bringing it in. He's been talking about it for a long, long time. So one quick other thing, we'll do Q&A. Let's talk about leaders, because I know we do have some sales leaders here. So I need you to be congruent. And what that means is, if you're going to be talking about pre-call planners, then you need to demand them before you go on a call, and you should be doing them too. So be congruent. I love to conduct WIMS, which is a weekly individual meeting. And so what is that? I call each of our people on a Monday, and it takes 5 minutes. And I say, hey, it's Dave, top 2, 3 things that you're attacking this week. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Then I talk to them on Friday. How did it go? And so that momentum that I talked about, that keeps momentum going. It keeps people focused. It keeps people within the guardrails that I want them to focus in on. And it's awesome, and they love it. You should create a cookbook. I've mentioned that to you. I told you I'd give you the template. Happy to do it. But also a playbook. A playbook is maybe capturing the talk tracks like we talked about. Hey, look, you're probably great at what you do, but you're not great at everything that's required at the job. And if you have people working for you, and I know if somebody left for a different opportunity for whatever reason, there's a ton of tribal knowledge that leaves. So why not take the best of the best? They have the best phone call. They've got the best LinkedIn letter that we've got. They've got this. And then, therefore, everybody's working off of the best of the best. That's really important. And you should be doing that too. Monkey's paws. Monkey's paws are smaller sales. In today's environment, we're doing a ton of monkey's paws. So we may not be going and selling in, this huge training program. We're doing assessments. We're going to do a study. A monkey's paw is a shipping term. And when a cruise liner comes into the port, they've got those massive lines. You can't throw them over. First of all, you can't throw them, but it kills whoever's on the bottom. So they take a tennis ball with some twine and they throw it out, okay? So that's important, because then they pull in the big sail. They do that. And I think that's really what I'm asking you to think about. Are there any foot in the door strategies that you may have that would allow us to have a relationship together, lower that buyer-seller wall, you prove all the things that, I have confidence and conviction in you now, the buyer-seller wall's going down, they will become customers when things slow down. And we've been doing that for years, and it works. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you in our quick 50 minutes together. So as you can see on your screen, I want to give you an offer. I want to make available to you an app that we have, which is through voice. It's Alexa, leading edge, nobody else has it, that you can just say, hey, I'd love to find something on prospecting, and boom, it comes up. It's going to go search all of our content. I've got 5,000 assets in there. I want to learn something about social selling. Boom, it comes up. You can have that as my gift. Or there's something else in there, which is hey, some webinars that we've had in the past to deal with some of the topics that we've talked about today. Or, as I said, crash a class. If you want to crash a class with our local trainer and they are rock stars, then happy to do it. All you have to do is just say, hey, I've heard Dave and he said I could crash a class, and go as my guest. My hope is you'll become a raving fan. Look, we've talked about a lot today, and I'm going to go back to some of the things that I said earlier. You are made, not born. You can improve your productivity. You can choose how you look at that water hole. I don't see it, or I'm just going to absolutely go right into the tank. So think about your mindset, think about the behaviors that you're doing, and think about your techniques and practice your talk tracks. If you just take 2 things from what I've shared with you today, you will be far more productive than you were. So I hope that we have an opportunity to meet each other face to face. But until then, good selling.